welcome to Somewhere on the Spectrum. For today's story, we are going back in time, back 27 years. Is it just me, or like the older you get, do you just get more freaked out by the amount of time that's passed? Like, this doesn't feel like it happened 27 years ago. But maths, which I'm not very good at, tells me it did indeed happen 27 years ago. Okay. So we're going back to high school, and I have a memory. My memories are tricky. They are not very easy to get hold of, but if I can get hold of a piece of them or get hold of a smell or a sound, music track is really helpful, then it can suddenly unearth a whole bunch of stuff. My brain is not organized. I heard some people can organize their brains into like houses or something. It's very confusing. My brain's not organized like that. It's just like a mad black hole, and you just have to go in and look for a bunch of stuff, and you just keep looking until you find it, and it may or may not be there. Anyway, we're going back to high school and walking along the front. I used to live in Scotland on the Clyde, and walking along the front with my bestie next to me, and a bit of an insane grin on my face, and my best friend asking me if I was happy, and me saying yes, I was, because I just got myself a new boyfriend. If that sounds like I was buying a car, that's what it felt like too. I was feeling very satisfied. I felt like job done, task ticked. I had achieved the goal of high school. Was it to get good grades? Possibly. Missed that one. But I got the boyfriend goal. Score. And then it all gets a little messy. There's no timeline in my brain. It skips. So I can't follow through a particular timeline to tell you exactly what happened one after the other. But I can remember pieces, and I can remember feelings. And one of the things that is very clear to me is this feeling, and this is not just that boyfriend, this is every relationship I've been in. This feeling that, right, now I have this boyfriend, I need to make sure that I am the best girlfriend that they've ever wanted, which always was about turning myself into their ideal girlfriend. It says a lot about masking and autism and where we are mentally, even by 14, 15, 16 years of age, that my first response was not to believe that he wanted to be my boyfriend because he liked me as I was, but rather to assume that I now needed to turn myself into whoever he wanted as a girlfriend. It's not very healthy, turns out. So I was constantly listening for any hints or tips about what the perfect girlfriend looked like. And over the years, I was not with that person for years. I'm talking about over various relationships. This could include songs that they had loved with their exes that I would then take on as being our song, which obviously in hindsight, very weird, not a good idea, but I did that quite a few times. Wearing clothes, makeup, hairstyles, if they said they liked short hair, then considering cutting my hair. If they like long hair, then growing it out or leaving it down. I hated my hair down. If they said they preferred your hair down rather than putting in a ponytail, I would live with it, despite the fact that I hated it. The sensory overload of hair on your neck is too much. But I would push through that so that I could be the girl with the hair down. Yeah, just all of the things I would be looking for. Even like the way that I would laugh, if there were comments about the way that I would laugh, and I would think, oh, I need to change that. I did. That we might cover another day. So carefully changing myself to match what I thought he wanted, and trying my best to be a good girlfriend. Obviously, this is pre-Google era, trying to figure out from the people around me what a good girlfriend was, and then trying to do all of those things. Sometimes those things I would be uncomfortable with. Sometimes close, intimate affection. I was much more mentally younger, I think, than a lot of my cohort. So that sort of physical intimacy was very overwhelming for me, but also touch generally is very overwhelming for me. And of course, didn't know I was autistic, so I didn't know that that was a thing. So all of these things. And then inevitably, what would happen is I would get dumped, obviously. My relationships in general last about 4 months. That's kind of the top end of how this goes. So we have getting together, 4 months of me working really hard to change who I am and be the best girlfriend, to get to a point where they're like, who the heck is this person? And then they are like, and break up with me. And then I'm going, what's happening? I worked so hard. I did everything for you. And really this feeling of, I did so much. I'm really annoyed. I'm really frustrated. I'm really confused. Like, I thought I made myself into the perfect person. Why don't you like me anymore? And depending on the time and the situation, a lot of this also sometimes came with being isolated from the group. If you were friends with that group and then you dated someone in that group, then being isolated from that group, him getting a new girlfriend and me being like, what? How did you so quickly? What's going on there? There's a lot of the things that are very normal for teenage relationships that were extremely confusing for me, but also going on and being older, following that same pattern, always assuming that this must be the right thing to do, and never knowing that this was not helpful. And really getting to diagnosis and the process of research and unpicking your mask after diagnosis. And I remember, so now we're jumping forward to about 10 years ago, where I could afford to have a counselor for a very short period of time, also pre-diagnosis, but only just. And I remember having a conversation with her about my best friend at the time and realizing that it had never crossed my mind that somebody would accept me just for who I was. I think never once. I always knew my dad accepted me just for who I was, but other than that, I always felt like I needed to be someone else for everybody else. So, fun times, such fun times. So really, we have this relationship challenge. We're going into a relationship. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle it? And the immediate response for autistic people, no, not all autistic people, some autistic people, high maskers, not all women and not every woman, and also some men, because men also mask. Big shock. For some people going into that relationship, the first response is going to be to build another mask. And we might not even know that we're doing it. I certainly, although I was doing that, although there was some conscious thought between, okay, now I need to do this, now I need to do that, I'm very analytical. So it's very much like, okay, figure everything out and then figure out how to like impose that on myself. So from that perspective, it was conscious, but I didn't really realize that nobody else was doing this. I thought everybody was doing the same thing. I thought everybody was struggling just as much as I was. They just had better instructions or they were better at hiding it. So it never crossed my mind that I was the only person that was doing this. So that's the first part with your autism diagnosis, to suddenly have that feeling of, wait a second, you guys just weren't doing this. You just didn't have these feelings and challenges. And that can feel very shocking and infuriating and upsetting. And there's also that piece of, why didn't anybody tell me? And feeling let down by everybody because they just left you out there to handle it by yourself. But we have to remember that nobody else knew either. So yeah, downside to this time frame is that we didn't have the knowledge about autism that we have today. And so everybody was in the dark and nobody knew what was going on. So even though we can be angry, there's not really anyone to get angry at, which is frustrating. So next, let's look at the traits. What kind of traits are we dealing with in this situation or these kinds of situations? So obviously the first one is masking. Yes, big time. Building a mask, maintaining a mask, trying to cobble one together from what people are telling you that they like, that they want, and then holding that the whole time that you're with the person, trying somehow to maintain that mask. I've spoken to a few autistic people in relationships, and it seems to depend very much on the person that they're with, and also to some extent the level of neurodiversity with the person they're with, it seems, to some extent for some people. Some people are able to be totally themselves with their partner. Some people it's 25%, some people it's 75%, everybody's different. I would suggest that if you are masking 75% of the time with your partner, that is a problem, because that is tiring. That's really exhausting. And at some point, your partner's going to wonder who the heck they're with, because you can't keep this up forever. So awareness of how much of yourself are you showing, and thinking about, can you drop some parts of the mask? Is there a way to build that relationship to make it stronger so that you feel comfortable to do that? Or maybe it's not the right place. Whatever, I don't know. Don't trust me. I have, as I said, relationships 4 months. That's it, tops for me. So if you're in a long-term relationship, well done. Congratulations. You figured it out. I have not figured it out. But I think I would say now, if I was to go into another relationship, I would want to be as unmasked as possible, which would be terrifying. But that's possibly the only way that I could actually feel like I could relax in that situation. And that's sort of the point, right? Anyway, we're off piste. Number 2, social challenges. Of course, as autistic people, we struggle to read the signals, to understand why does it feel like that person is feeling one thing and telling me something else. This difference is really challenging for us because we sometimes can read what is happening underneath. We're reading their facial, their body language, and some of us, if we're super empathetic, we're reading their energy levels. And then they're telling us, oh, I'm fine, or whatever the thing is. And you're like, meh, no, you're not. And it turns out you're not supposed to point that out. Turns out that's not good. That's not good social etiquette. So social challenges, being able to read the room, being able to understand what's wanted of us, and being able to be ourselves in that situation. All of these are highly challenging. For me, impulsivity is a massive problem. That's part of my ADHD. So if I would get stressed out or emotional, then I would lash out very quickly, making bad judgments, bad calls, saying the wrong thing at the wrong time, jumping to conclusions, all these kind of things, very, very common because of the impulsivity. I just do it, just react on it straight away. Which goes kind of hand in hand with emotional roller coaster or dysregulation, emotional dysregulation. So for many of us, we can have big emotions and we can't really manage those emotions very well. So we can have very furious anger. I think relationships are a challenging one because that feeling of love or lust or limerence, which is a relatively new term for me, but limerence means that kind of hyper focus, but on a person. We'll put a link in the description for limerence. So all of those kind of feelings are very big, can be very big for us. And that makes it super overwhelming for us to deal with those kind of emotions. So if we put that together with our impulsivity, that can lead to danger zones. In addition, we could also be dealing with alexithymia, which is not being able to identify your emotions. For me, I can have this like big feeling in my chest, but I couldn't necessarily tell you, oh, that's what this is. So we can have those big feelings, we can react to those big feelings, but we don't even necessarily understand what they were. And we don't have processing time because of the impulsivity. We don't have the processing time to manage those big emotions. And because this is a romantic situation, and I was talking about teenage years, but I think in general it's kind of a big thing, then yeah, more and more uncontrollable big emotions. So looking back right to the beginning of my story, I was happy because I got a handsome boyfriend. Yay, I ticked the box. But I didn't show him like any of who I was. Basically, I showed nobody. Nobody knew who I was. I made no effort to build the relationship because I assumed that we had decided we were in a relationship. So that was it, job done. I didn't really know like what to do next, or that I needed to do anything next in terms of making that a stronger relationship. Definitely, this wasn't the first time that this happened. It certainly wasn't the last time. There are patterns now. Having had my diagnosis and all of the research that came after that, I can now look back and see these patterns in my life. And I would say that it's worthwhile for you to look at those relationships from your past and look for patterns. We are pretty good at pattern recognition. And you might find that there are patterns that go way, way back a really long way. You might find there are patterns that are connected to something, some thought, some idea, some belief that you weren't really aware of in the past that actually have become the key point. So for example, not proud of this one, I was the rebound girl. I have been the rebound girl multiple times because I somehow got it into my head that if I was the rebound girl, then they would date me and I would be able to keep them. This thing of I can change them. I think a lot of women had this feeling of like, I can change them. For me, it will be different. I definitely had that in a big way. And that is not a good way to go into a relationship for anything. And so it was a really long time. My last not proper relationship, I was a rebound girl. And that was the last time that I was like, it dawned on me one day what I was doing and why it was never working. It was never, ever working. They were always breaking up with me and then going on to be with someone else because I was a rebound girl. Of course it was never going to work with me. So part of the challenge for us is that it can take a really long time for us to process stuff, which is why if you can afford it, getting a therapist is super duper helpful, but they need to know about autism because they can help you process this stuff faster and show you things that you might not be able to connect very quickly. But for me, most of my key realizations have been mine, have come from me directly and have taken a really long time. Like we're talking years, sometimes decades. So don't be surprised if that's the case. But I would definitely say if you are unsure about relationships or you're frustrated with relationships or you don't know if you can go in relationships, all those kind of things, look back on your previous experiences, even if you've never been in one, the times that you had crushes on people and stuff, and look for patterns. Are you looking for a certain kind of person? Are you going by what the movies say that you should be looking for? Because that is problematic for us, you know. And I would also say start following some people on Instagram or TikTok or wherever you get your social media who are couples. I will put a couple in the description that are really, really good, cute, adorable couples, but also talking about their relationship so that you can start to understand what a healthy relationship looks like, what a neurodiverse relationship might look like, because we don't see that in the movies. So it's helpful for us to see it in someone else and see, oh, okay, that's why it works, or that's what they liked about them. And quite often I think people like stuff that we think they must hate. So it can be really helpful to understand that too. So eventually, big surprise, I swore off relationships because I just felt like I was hurting people all the time and I didn't know what I was doing wrong or how to fix it. So I just kind of decided I was the problem and just, let's not do that. And so for me, the diagnosis was really important to understand myself better. And with that key, then I was able to look back and say, actually, it wasn't as simple as I was just hurting people all the time, because actually I didn't have all the knowledge. And sometimes they were hurting me. And sometimes it was a misunderstanding. And sometimes it would never have worked because of my autism. Like they were never going to be the person for me. So the negativity, the self-doubt, the lack of trust in myself, feeling like I was a bad person, all of that came from not having a diagnosis. And for some people, a self-diagnosis will be enough to start to undo that and to be able to progress forward. For me, I felt like I needed an official person to tell me, yes, you are right. This is the thing. So everybody's going to be different on that front. But having that diagnosis or self-diagnosis is a great first step to then sort of re-acknowledging your life and looking at it with that new lens, that new key of, okay, so now where do we go from here? And with my diagnosis and the information that I, following that research and things that I did, I could better see how my autism impacted my relationships and how trying to fit into society made me more vulnerable and also less able to find my place, right? I was so busy masking and trying to fit in there that I didn't know that there was a whole other world, there was a whole other community where I wouldn't have to try so hard to fit in. And so I think that's another thing post-diagnosis is looking for that community, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face, whether you find a local charity, whatever, look for that community. And if it's online and you're just, scrolling and looking at people, that's okay too. Start there. But eventually go looking for your community, because being in a room full of autistic people, you will find you have so many experiences in common and you will finally feel recognized. So it's really important to get to that point eventually. And the thing was, I was still working hard to develop my mask at school, right? When we're 14, 15, 16, we are still figuring out who we are. Some of us never get to that point. Some of us never get to the point where we figure out who we are because there's this big wall of autism that we don't understand and we can't get past. And once we get our autism diagnosis, like we get a door in that wall and we can go through and we can see, oh, wait a second, there's all this other stuff in here that I didn't know was here. I had no idea because I was hiding it behind my mask. And at school, you're still developing that mask. So you have no idea that you are masking a lot of the time or that you're struggling with anything that's different to anyone else. That's the key thing. You think everybody's doing the same thing that you're doing and you think this is totally normal and they're just better at it. But once you get your diagnosis or you self-diagnose, you realize, oh, no, turns out they weren't. So my automatic reaction was to try and be what everyone else wanted me to be at school, from my parents, from my teachers, everyone, which that sadly is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. And especially in a relationship, that is literally the opposite to what you're going to do in a healthy relationship. Yeah, fun times. I hope this is useful for you and maybe some of you can relate. Please let me know in the comments if you relate to this story in any way. And I hope it helps you see how these sorts of things can be impacted by our autism. I'm sure I missed some traits, so feel free to drop those in the comments as well. And let me know if there are any particular traits that have heavily impacted your relationships. Okay, I'll see you next time. Bye.